All right, what is up, my brothers from another mother? We have a sponsored request from a gentleman today that wants me to cover the topic of cryopreservation, vasectomies. He's really, at the end of the day, looking for a better way to be in control of the birth so he doesn't have any scares again in the future. So I think this will be a useful topic to a lot of guys that have considered or may have not considered this yet, but here we go. Big fan of the channel. I'm strongly considering freezing my sperm, which is called cryopreservation, and having a vasectomy in order to permanently be in control of the birth. Now, if you haven't seen the 9 Rules of Tomasi video, put a card up in the top right. Watch that later, but I cover that in detail, and that conversation with Rollo, we talk about always being in control of the birth. So if you haven't seen that, check it out later. From the conversations he's had with other men on this topic, he thinks it would be an interesting video topic. Obviously, feel free to expand to cover birth control in more general terms. I'll deal with that. The combination of cryopreservation, and all this means, guys, really is you freeze your sperm. It goes through a freezing and a thawing process when you need it. So you've always got the good stuff ready to go if you need it. I mean, that's the hope and promise anyway. So the combination of freezing sperm and having a vasectomy seems like a very radical thing, but it's also rational in his mind. Perhaps for Red Pill Awakened men in general, I'd be very keen to hear the thoughts to make sure I don't miss any blind spots on such a big decision. So here's a quick background. Just turned 30, lives in a premier city in Europe. Promising career, had a terrifying episode of an unplanned pregnancy with a beautiful young woman in another country. Through some back and forth, that was terminated. Even though he had some second guess, he was still questioning, what if she's still pregnant? Of course, her friends confirmed it was done. Shortly after the termination, Red the Rational Male took the red pill. Have had a few near misses in the past. Had girls take Plan Bs. But I never want to leave birth control to chance again. This is a real wake-up call at this point in time. An unplanned child would inevitably take a massive toll on my life, financially, mentally, and emotionally. Eventually, I do want to have a family, he says, planning for 2 to 4 kids, but with a woman that I deem an excellent complement to my life in about 10 years' time. So when he's 40, he's saying he's currently 30. And after I've built some wealth and established himself. If any of these criteria are not met, I'm fairly certain I'd prefer not to have kids at all. Obviously, I intend to continue to live a sexually active life. Once again, thank you for your content. Okay, so let's deal with this here. Probably, I'm going to say from an overview, it's probably not a bad strategy. Yes, it's pretty dramatic, and it involves some work and some costs. But based on the way you've described the way that you live your life, if at 30 you're planning on spinning plates and letting the cream rise to the top and see if there's a potential, viable wife material, let's call it, that comes out of your dating, and you decide to, have kids with her and raise a family, I get it. That's fine. So the only problem really with the cryopreservation is, from what I understand anyway, because I've done some research on this, is the freezing and thawing process of the sperm it's not always successful. There have been no instances that I've found where you will end up with birth defects if you freeze and thaw. I mean, if it works, it works. But at the end of the day, here's a problem with it. I mean, we're not designed to freeze and thaw that stuff and use it 10 years later. It's not designed to work that way. It's designed to, it comes out, it's used then and there on the spot, and you make more of it all the time. I mean, men make millions and millions of sperm, basically on a monthly basis. Women only drop 1 egg. So eggs, generally speaking, are more valuable, whereas, for sperm, they're a lot less valuable, which is why we think, we can just get vasectomies and freeze and all that sort of stuff. So with that being said, the natural order of things is always the best way to do it, in my view. When I go to the grocery store, I prefer to get my broccoli fresh instead of getting it from the frozen section and stick it in the freezer and thawing it out and cooking my meal and throwing it on the plate. The freezing and thawing process, I know, deteriorates everything. So I can't see in any circumstance or scenario where you would have healthier, better, more useful sperm 10 years on down the road from the freezing and thawing process. I mean, it's bound to complicate the situation a little bit. One thing I'm sure that they don't talk about that often, and you can't get a lot of answers on, is how successful is that going to be 10 years down the road when you've already had, your vasectomy and everything's tied off and it's not working and you're shooting blanks, and you try to thaw that out, and maybe, I don't know, some of it is useless, or it's not effective, or you might have problems with it. Again, I haven't found anything that said that there's a strong correlation to birth defects. It seems to be fine in that sense. If it works, it's going to work, but it could potentially cause extra problems and costs later on down the road. I know a few people that have done in vitro fertilization, which is basically the same thing. I mean, they're just thawing it out. This is a slightly different way to do it. It's an extra step with more complication, but it's very costly. And it's not always effective. And you always got to remember, I mean, if you're 40 when you're doing this and you're dating a chick that's also 40, that could be problematic. Ideally, you want to be with somebody a lot younger, because they're the carrier of the child and they're going to ideally be more healthier. I mean, you know, your chances of running into complications with the pregnancy go up dramatically the older that you are. So you also want to consider that too. Now, as far as the male experience and perspective, like I said, from an overview, it's probably not a bad idea. It's probably a pretty good idea based on how you've described the way that you're living your life. But at the end of the day, the human body is designed to work a certain way. When you snip and you tie off, you're not getting rid of stuff that's just going to sit there. Okay. There's some people. Sorry, let me just back a little bit. I think it's widely accepted that vasectomies are very safe and they're very effective. There's not a lot that I've seen that talks about complications that are tied into it. That being said, there's also a part of the medical community and the demographics out there that choose to avoid it. Again, you're cutting into the body, you're tying a little knot, and that part of you is not leaving when it's supposed to. It's just sitting there. Some people, you know, from what I've read and heard, it just absorbs in your body. Other people say it can lead to greater risks of certain diseases and ailments as you age as a man. So look into that for yourself. I am not a doctor. I am not giving you medical advice. I am just reading your request and trying to offer some insight. There's going to be guys right now that are watching this that are either considering this as well or may have done it. If you have done it and you have some experience, chime in. Let this guy know if this is a good strategy. If you want 100% certainty that you will always be in control of the birth, this is the way to go. This is a good strategy, and I agree with you. There's only like 2 or 3 different types of birth control for men, right? It was condoms, vasectomies, and really being a really good puller outer, and that's about it. Women, on the other hand, have, I don't know, dozens, maybe even close to 30 different types of birth control that have been invented over the years. I wouldn't recommend doing the male birth control pill, which is something they've been talking about recently. That really messes with men's testosterone levels. Do not do that. Do not use that. But if you want complete certainty and assurance that you don't have any problems, once they tie it up and you do your check, you know, 3 weeks later, whatever it is, and they make sure that there's blanks in there and you're good to go, you can do whatever the hell you want, wherever you want. There really is almost zero chance of having any problems. They can be reversed. You know, I know a few people that have successfully had them reversed. I know a few people that have tried to have them reversed and were unsuccessful. Again, there's costs and there's pain involved in that. But if your main objective is assurance that you're always in control of the birth, this is the way to go. The back end of it, again, nothing like there's no free lunch, guys. Whenever you do stuff and you change, you know, the way your body's working, you know, if you change the direction of human nature, you know, if you will, and you take control of these things, there's potentially going to be greater costs or complications later on down the road. So when you're 40 years old, again, you could have all kinds of costs and additional complications at that time to facilitate a healthy pregnancy. So just consider that too. I'll leave it at that. If you guys have any topic requests, I'll show you how to do that. You can request a video on this tab over here. I'll put a little pop-up on the top right of this screen. You basically just make the PayPal donation, your name and email address. The second page will give you the option to fill out the request just like this guy's email did. And if you're interested in joining my men's community, also pop-up banner on the top right. You can watch this video on this page. It breaks it all down for you, what's all included. If you're an entrepreneur, there's also a business tier too. But consider that if you want to level up and join another community of like-minded men chasing excellence, not tail. All right, thanks for watching today's video. See you guys in the next one. Peace.